Recording is in progress. Good evening, y'all. This is Platoon, Echo Platoon, week 15, day 2. We're going to talk about creating nested objects with DRF, Django REST framework. Django does a lot of cool things. Django's REST framework is a really cool thing. Saves you a lot of work. I'm glad we show you how to use it before we show you this Django REST framework plugin, because you'll have a better understanding of what's going on. This abstracts out some things and builds stuff for you, which is cool, but it's nice to know how to hand roll things from time to time. So we'll be utilizing the Django REST framework to do nested operations such as, I don't know, a Pokemon has moves. You want to build all those all at one time, right? Your API, you shouldn't have to create all of the relations separately and then hook them together. You want them to create all at one time, right? It wouldn't make sense for you to fill out a form and every single form was one thing about you, and you had to mix it all in at the end. You'd want something that's easy to work with as a user and does what it's supposed to, does all the nesting on the back end. So what we're going to do today is understand create operations in DRF. We will be creating a nested object. We're going to be overriding the serializer's create method. It's got a built-in create method, but we're going to override it. The serializer doesn't really handle these nested objects super well, and that's okay. That's just its default. Its default is to not handle nesting very well. We're also going to be implementing view for create operations with nested objects. Serializer, view, they go together. So we will be working off of the nested views 1 branch of the Pokemon app. That is what I am on. Nested views 1. I have redone my database from scratch, made migrations, migrated, started my virtual environment. We're good to go. As I said, on day 2, we'll focus on the create operation of CRUD and DRF. We will learn how to override the serializers, like I said. So the DRF, or in DRF, the create operation corresponds to HTTP post method. Posts are creations. When creating a new object, the process typically involves receiving data from a client, validating this data, and sending it to the database. We know that. When dealing with nested objects, the create operation becomes a bit more complex. We not only have to create the parent object, in our case of Pokemon, we also need to create associated nested objects, the moves, and establish the correct relationships within them, between them. So what that's saying is we don't want the user to have to create a Pokemon and then go add moves and then have to figure out and reference that other Pokemon. The way we're going to do it is we're going to create the Pokemon, set that to a variable so we don't lose it, and then when we're creating the moves, we're going to be able to associate them with that Pokemon, add it to that instance. We don't want to lose that instance of that Pokemon we created. It's all going to be done within one function. Nice and clean. As I mentioned before, the default create method provided by the DRF's model serializer works well for non-nested serializers. However, when dealing with nested serializers, we need to override the method. All we're doing, when I say override, it sounds fancy. We're not. We're just putting this function here that says create. So when you try to create or invoke create with Pokemon Serializer, it's gonna ignore the other one. Remember how we used to do that with Python objects, y'all? Or sorry, not objects, object-oriented programming. And we could, when it say override was just creating a second function with the same name. That's what we're doing here. All coming back to us. So nothing too fancy, but we are going to create a file called serializers.py. We're going to do that within the Pokemon app. Yeah. Let's pay some stuff and talk about it. So we're going to use serializers from REST framework. Great. Pokemon model. We're pulling in move serializer. Let's go check that out real fast. Very simple. This is the move serializer. This is the model. These are the fields. We're not even going to be using all the fields that are in our models, just these 3. Actually, really, I mean, just these 2 arguments. Not real complicated. So now you've seen it. Don't say you don't know what it looks like, because we're pulling it in here. We're also pulling in the data type, the table, move. And that's coming from move.
One question.
Yeah.
So then the reason why we can't see the move app in the models is because we're pulling it. Like that's a totally different app, but then within the models we're calling that
Yes.
to use as the nested information within the Pokemon.
Correct.
The Pokemon.
Yes. So when we run manage.py, this is all in relation to it. So this kind of makes it nice and easy. If we need to pull something from another app within our apps here, we just reference it by the app name and take its serializer. That's handy because we can call different files serializers. We're going to have one in move app called serializers.py, and we're also going to have one within our Pokemon app called serializers.py. That's what we're doing. We're referencing it. We're referencing the models from a different app. That's how we can have all these kind of microservices, if you will, separated between different apps and pull them all together and reference each other. It's cool. It's nice. It's scalable. You wouldn't want just one big move or models.py. Works fine when we're dealing with 40 lines of code, but if you start getting in the realm of like, I don't know, 1,000 different models, that would suck. So we separate out our different models between the different apps, and that is the Django approved way. So the serializers.py that we did create within Pokemon app. Oh, sorry. Did that answer your question? I kind of just kept going.
Yes, definitely. Because when I was looking at the models, I'm like, but where is this? Now I can see where it's coming from. So
Yep. This is helpful. These are nice. It's kind of what there's a lot of argument. You'll see in when we start getting into JavaScript, this stuff's going to look like this. It's going to be backwards. I think I got to remind myself, but it's going to be something like I don't know exactly, but it's going to be kind of like that. Don't like this so much in JavaScript because that kind of stinks. When you're reading at this, when you're trying to debug some code, you're gonna be like, well, what the heck is 2 dots up? Or actually, that wouldn't even be technically correct. It would be like this. Anyways, you don't always have to send it. They're actually like directly to the path. Python's very specific about it. It's relational to where you invoked Python. So it's easy to look that up real quick and kind of guess where things come from. I like it. Once you get used to Python imports, they're not bad. They frustrate you at first, though. So here is our Pokemon serializer. You'll be using the model serializers from Django REST Framework. Moves. We're going to set that to the move serializer. Easy. We're going to set the model. It's Pokemon. Here are the fields we shall accept. And here is us overriding the create method. So we're just going to take invalidated data. Validated data should be the Pokemon with the object thing like that. We'll look at it here in just a second, and I'll show it to y'all because I had to look at this up while I was debugging earlier. And we're going to pull out the moves by validated data.pop. That removes it from here, adds it to here. And then Pokemon is going to be creating a Pokemon model using quargs of the validated data minus the moves, because moves is not a table. In our Pokemon model, it's not a field in our Pokemon model, sorry. See, rather it is, but it's not something we can inject directly. It's, it's relational, right? So we'll add it in after the fact. Then we're gonna get our move data by iterating through moves and pretty much just keep adding them to this Pokemon that we pulled, right? We created this Pokemon here, set it as this variable Pokemon. We could change that if we wanted to. And then for the move data, we're going to iterate through, create it, and then we're going to add it to this Pokemon. And then you're going to return the Pokemon when you're all said and done. Does that make sense? It will make a little bit more sense when we look at the post request. So hold your horses if you don't like what I'm saying just yet. It will make more sense with the JSON. I never read this stuff, so I never know that I'm reading what we're about to read, but we're going to read over it again. In the grade method, we first remove the moves data from the validated data. Yep. We then create Pokemon object remaining data. Okay, we just said all this. Note that this assumes each move is unique to the Pokemon and doesn't yet exist in the database. If the same move could be associated with multiple Pokemon, you need to check whether each move already exists before creating it. Yeah, these are not unique moves. We're just creating a bunch of them. They're not being set in the database as uniques and then referenced. They're just being shoved into that database. So moves could be very, we could create the same move multiple times. Going forward, that's not how we'd run it, but this is good for the example. Implementing a view for the create operation. This is what we're going to do. With our serializer ready, we can now implement a view to handle the post request. Oop. What we got? I think I'm going to write over on the right thing. Am I editing the right thing? It's all this, right? Should double check myself. We're going to rewrite the all Pokemon method. So there we go. And anything else not going on here? Clean this up a bit. Know that we're going to need that anymore. We'll leave it. You need dupes. It's clean enough. Cool. This isn't new. For our get request, we're just going to get a Pokemon by the name, yada yada, not real important. But for this post, this is what we've added. We're going to reference that Pokemon serializer. The data that we put into the Pokemon serializer is going to come from the request.data. So whatever the user sends us, the .data version of it, rather that's the key. That's going to be the JSON body that the user is sending us. If it's valid, basically, if the serializer, all right, so we try to create this, right? We try to plug it into the Pokemon serializer using that data. It's going to run over here and ideally use this validated data. If it creates, if it's fine, if it's good, then we'll continue, we'll save it, we'll print it. Remember, it's easy to get lost in the woods as far as what the heck we're doing with all of this. Just as a refresher, y'all, somebody is going to send us a request to this endpoint, to this endpoint, this path, just under Pokemon app. That calls this view here. If it's a get request, it'll go to this one. If it's a post request, it'll go to this one, and it's going to look at the post request data. It's then going to take that and say, oh, that's some junk. It's probably JSON. I'm going to use my serializer, which, as y'all know, changes JSON to Django instance, Django data models, if you want to call them that. Basically, you can't one-for-one plug JSON straight into the database. You have to tell Django how to do it. But that's all that is. It's converting JSON to a data object that we can work with. If it's good, if we try to create it and the serializer says, yeah, I can turn that JSON into a data object, we'll do that. In the post request, oh, sorry. Yeah, so it's going to return it. I'm getting a little backwards, oopsies. But get is going to convert the Pokemon that it wants, those data objects, into JSON. On the post request, we're going to try, so back up to what I was saying earlier, we're going to try to convert it to a serializer. If that works, if it's cool, if it's valid, we're going to save that serializer. So when we create it over here, that's creating an instance in this model, or sorry, we're going to look at this model. We're going to try and plug the JSON in there. and it's going to create an instance. That instance is not in the database yet. It is just an object-oriented programming, right? This is just an object of Pokemon that's not done anything yet. When the serializer finishes, this view will have a data object, and we're going to set save. That's when it goes in the database. We're going to print it so we can see it on our server, and then we're going to return it. So if valid, let's return a 201. If it's not valid, we're going to spit back a 400 and give them the response back. So hopefully a useful message attached with a 400 HTTP error. But the view is the controller, or sorry, that's not exactly right. Model view controller. The view is what's going to be handling the backend recipient, side of this. A lot of review, a lot of talking about things, but I don't like you getting lost between what the heck's going on when we start adding serializers to it. So everything I said, let's verify them right. This view class will automatically use our Pokemon serializer to handle post requests. It will validate the data, call the create method to save the data to the database, return a JSON representation of the new Pokemon. Yup. So making a post request with nested data. I've been saying nested data. Y'all probably know what I'm talking about, but now you super know what I'm talking about. This is an object right here. Within that, we've got this Pokemon here. Moves is a many table that can contain these moves. So these are separate data objects that are going to be shoved into the larger data object together, right? This is going to be all the different moves it has, total thing. That's what's going to come in as. So a user could submit both the Pokemon data as well as moves that it should have. A weird thing for the post request to, do. Who knows what this Pokemon app's can do eventually. Probably when you capture one, maybe this is all the data that comes with it and it gets shoved in. I guess that's the way it works. So cool. Let's add that. I'm using Insomnia again. I've got this saved right here. That's the same JSON object. We've got JSON type. That's the body. I've never run this before. Oh. Try it again. Cool. 201 created. That looks familiar. Oh, nice. Return response serializer dot data. This serializer that we created. What is the data of the serializer? It's this Pokemon in JSON. That's it. That's how we got this back. It also wrote it to our server. If we want some sweet little server logs, if we want to pipe the output, pipe the standard output into some logs or something that we could throw in Splunk or God knows where you want to put them, Grafana. We got some printed stuff here too. Sound good? Ain't that a nice clean API? None of that is useful to read. Does anyone have any questions about the steps we have taken? What is going on with the data? What this API is doing? Does anyone think this is cool? We're gonna have any backend developers? Or you guys all want to do dumb front end stuff? Stop recording before I get up on this. Cool. All right. That's it.